Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Friday, June 30th, 2023. And we've reached a milestone, an end of an era. The important change notice I've been speaking of, the Alaska Weather Show, at least in the traditional sense that this has been coming to the people of Alaska since 1977. This is the last TV broadcast out over the airwaves of this show. And starting tomorrow, Saturday, July 1st, the National Weather Service will be providing a modified web-based version of the program that you can receive over a new YouTube channel. And in making that change, we will be moving from Alaska Public Media over to National Weather Service YouTube channel at NWS Alaska. So go ahead and subscribe to that channel and you'll be able to receive similar content to what you have been able to in the past. More importantly, I just want people to take a moment and consider the impacts of this change. A public comment period remains open through July 30th, and we are very interested to learn what are your current sources of weather information? I'm just going to step back and read this. What are some of the current sources of weather information and climate information do you use, say, for marine weather, aviation weather, public general weather? What additional weather information would you like that you are not currently able to get, have not been able to receive? How do you receive this weather information? What do you use? What service? What device? Do you use a cell phone, a computer, a ham radio? Do you get a signal over the airways and receive it by traditional television? And in areas we've had, because we live in such a large state and there are many rural areas that don't have the infrastructure for the communications, what suggestions do you have to reduce some of these coverage gaps so we can better serve the rural communities? And the impact, what is the impact of replacing this traditional TV broadcast with the web-based version? So if you can provide some feedback along these lines about also anything, if you have a fond memory of the show in years past, please send your comments to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov, and you have through July 30th to do this. So I hope if this show has really meant something to you over the years, please let us know. And if you have any other questions, suggestions, concerns, you can reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. And I do want to take a moment just to thank our partners at Alaska Public Media for their production support over the years, especially Sean and Sherry. I also want to thank my team members for all of their help in making the show possible each day. And again, especially you, the viewer. So please send your comments in so your voice is heard. Looking at, for additional weather information, you can always go online to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's official online presence. And looking at the map of the continental U.S. this Friday afternoon, look at all these gray areas in the Northeast and Great Lakes. That's because there are air quality alerts due to very, very poor air quality from all of the smoke from the Canadian wildfires. Further south, we have excessive heat warnings and advisories for the middle, lower Mississippi Valley and much of the south. Air temperatures will be up around 100 degrees with feels like temperatures of 110 to 115. Severe thunderstorm watch, eastern Colorado, northwest Kansas. Back to the west, we have heat advisories and excessive heat warnings, southern California into southwest Arizona. So the heat is on there, especially in the southern U.S. Here in Alaska, we are going to finally get some warmer temperatures in areas this weekend. It's going to be seasonally reasonably warm, not excessively warm. Some showers and thunderstorms producing some heavier downpours across the northeastern Brooks Range over the past couple of days could cause some higher water levels on rivers and creeks in that area on the north side of the Brooks Range. So keep that in mind. Gale force low pressure system in front will impact the eastern Aleutians up to Alaska Peninsula and up around just south of Kodiak Island as we go into the earlier weekend. But the good news is for South Central, including the Anchorage Bowl, warmer and drier weekend weather is on the way, some of the best weather we've seen in a couple of weeks. And overall, we are looking for some warmer temperatures in the extended forecast over the northeastern mainland and down along the Alcan border into the Panhandle in the 6 to 10 day outlook here as we creep into the early part of July. Looking at some of the FAA webcams this Friday afternoon, Ambler has been kind of stuck under lower clouds in areas of mainly light rain, cool temperatures, only 50 degrees. It'll be warming up if you can get some sun here over the weekend, but there could be some scattered showers, isolated thunderstorms pop up with that warming. Anchorage, notice the breaks in the cloud cover of the mountains, Chugach Mountains having some cumulus buildups, but much better weather on the way for South Central for Saturday and Sunday will be drier and warmer. Some areas will be getting up around and maybe even a little above 70. So the special weather statement is for this area of the Brooks Range, the north side. There could be some rapidly rising creeks and rivers from rainfall from scattered showers and thunderstorms that dump some heavier rainfall. And so that'll be the case here, at least going into tonight, early weekend. Otherwise, we don't have any other significant advisories across the state. Fire weather danger here. Fire danger is relatively low. If we take a recall back to last 4th of July weekend, it was really, really warm and dry and fires all over the place. This year, we're very fortunate. The fire danger is very low across the interior of the mainland, and it should stay so here through the holiday weekend. Nevertheless, with the warmer weather this weekend, we're going to see some drying, even though there will be some scattered showers and isolated storms around areas of the interior that could dampen fuels. That's not always enough. Despite the rain, it's the fine fuels there that can ignite. So be very, very careful with any fireworks and campfires. And overall, low to moderate fire activity is expected as we go through July. And for Canada is having just an unprecedented fire season this year. For more information, if you search CWFIS to get official wildland fire data and forecast for Canada, that's where you want to go to get that particular information. Satellite imagery. Well, we have low pressure here in the Gulf still providing areas of southern panhandle of showers, Haida Gwaii, and then here's the other low back here toward the North Pacific that's going to ride northeastward and weaken, but as it does so, it's still going to provide some gale force winds along areas of the Alaska Peninsula. And up to the north, we have some lower cloud cover and fog along the Arctic coast down along the Chukchi Sea coastline as well. And the interior, we should start to see a little more sun break out in south central areas for Saturday. And the area of thicker clouds and rain will begin to dissipate over the western interior, as I mentioned earlier, around Ambler and those areas. That will tend to break up here as we go through the weekend. So on the weather map this afternoon, the systems are not especially strong. We would expect that for this time of year. Low pressure down the North Pacific, that'll be one of the main features that works its way northeastward. And then the low that's currently in the Gulf will continue to weaken as well. We do have a weak cold front back here in eastern Russia that'll press a little further east and kind of wash out as we go through the weekend. But here is that low later tonight, early on Saturday morning. That's the main weather feature. It does have some moderate rain around it. And as we go into Saturday, the low center stays just south of the eastern Aleutians, but along this frontal boundary, there could be some bands of moderate rain and some gustier gale force winds. A weaker ridge of high pressure tries to build back up into the northern Gulf, and then a few scattered showers and isolated storms expected across areas of the interior. And on Sunday, that low just stays south of the Alaska Peninsula with the occluded front weakening, but some moderate to locally heavier rains on the east side of Kodiak Island and there on areas of the Alaska Range across from Shelikof Strait. Weak high pressure ridge up here through the north and into the interior, so temperatures are going to be warming a bit on Sunday. Lows overnight Saturday morning, upper 40s to around 50 degrees many areas, but Saturday afternoon we could get back up in the 60s Anchorage Bowl, even 70 Talkeetna. Still cooler in the Panhandle Panhandle, the clouds still breaking up, a few lingering sprinkles or very light showers. Sunday, temperatures in the 40s, few 50-degree readings in the Panhandle. Same thing here, south central, but then with the offshore developing, a little drier conditions setting up here on Sunday for the Panhandle. Temperatures may be a few degrees cooler here across south central because of increasing cloud cover. Across the interior and north, readings around 50 along the Yukon River, generally above freezing even along the northwest Arctic coast, 70s along the Yukon River north of the Alaska Range. Some readings 50-ish or so there along the Arctic coast, and then on Sunday morning, lows generally in the 50s along the Yukon River, and it's possible a few spots could hit or just get up into the low 80s here. Yukon Flats on over toward the Alcan border at, say, Eagle, and even back toward the north and west, 55 or so there as you get up down toward Cape Lisburn or Wainwright, those areas there. It won't be quite as cold. And out across the southwest, lows 40s to near 50. Could see a 70-degree reading. Try and sneak in with some sun Saturday afternoon around Bethel. And then on Sunday morning, we expect lows 40s across the Aleutians, lower 50s, Kuskokwim and Yukon River valleys, and then back up into the 60s there for the southwest interior. Temperature-wise, we are going to see warmer temperatures early July set up across the northeast, mainland, and down in through the Panhandle. Below normal still the southwest, same story there. And maybe a little above normal precipitation across the northwest mainland and southwest, but below normal temperatures or precip in the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
The weekend is here, and let's take a look at your flight weather. If you have a flight planned Saturday or Sunday, low pressure will be situated just south of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island early Saturday, with a frontal system extending to the north and east. We expect IFR conditions there on the North Pacific side of the peninsula, pockets of IFR across areas of the southeast interior mountains, Wrangell, St. Elias Mountains down through the northern Panhandle. IFR, lower ceilings, some fog up there along the Arctic coast, Beaufort Sea. Also extending from St. Lawrence down through St. Matthew, St. Paul, and then across a good portion of the Aleutian chain. Saturday afternoon could see a few scattered thunderstorms pop up with the daytime heating, afternoon, evening there. Eastern Yukon Flats, 40-mile gold country out toward the Alaska-Canadian border, as well as the lower Yukon, upper Kuskokwim basins in the southwest interior. Sunday morning, areas of IFR along the inner coastal mountains, inner channels there of the Panhandle. Southwestern Gulf, especially down along the east side of Kodiak Island, again along areas of the Beaufort-Chukchi Seas through the Bering Strait, and the western half of the Bering Sea, and much of the central and western Aleutians. A few more scattered storms could redevelop on Sunday afternoon across the Yukon Flats down toward the 40-mile gold country. Otherwise, we expect IFR to be occurring across the lower southwestern Gulf, especially just offshore of the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Also up along the Beaufort Sea, and then across much of the central and lower Bering, including the central and western Aleutians. So past conditions Saturday in the Brooks Range, Anatuvik Pass, as well as Adigan Pass. We'll see MVFR conditions becoming VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill in the west arm there of the Alaska Range, MVFR to VFR. On Saturday, same thing as we go rainy on up through Windy Pass in the central Alaska Range, MVFR to VFR conditions on Saturday. Isabel starting out with MVFR giving way to VFR. Mentasta should generally hold on to MVFR conditions, though IFR conditions could linger out toward the northern portion of the Copper River Basin toward the Wrangell Mountains, and then Tanita Pass generally MVFR becoming VFR, and Portage Pass will start out early Saturday MVFR, trying to give way to VFR, though MVFR conditions will linger out across a good portion of Prince William Sound. Chilkoot and White in the northern Panhandle expect IFR early in the morning, lifting to MVFR as we go through the midday and afternoon. Freezing levels are lowest across the areas of the Russian Arctic coast. Otherwise, they bump up to generally 6,000 to 8,000 feet through the southwestern half of the mainland to 10,000 feet, Yukon Flats, eastern Brooks Range. Lower down here over the north central Gulf Coast, and then as we go down toward, associated with the area of low pressure and warmer air ahead of that, south of the Alaska Peninsula with freezing levels of 8,000 to 10,000 feet. Greatest threat for icing on Saturday, some moderate icing associated with the frontal system and low that's sitting there south of the Alaska Peninsula with the front draped and pushing slowly north and northeastward up along the Alaska Peninsula above 6,000 and above 8,000 feet, especially in areas of the North Pacific south of the peninsula. Upper level jet stream is strongest over British Columbia coming from Dixon entrance. This is at 30,000 feet. We have winds in excess of 100 knots. Bring it down to 700 millibars. We have a low circulation, the more dominant low, just south of the eastern Aleutians with a counterclockwise circulation, southerly south-southeast flow over the Alaska Peninsula and then turning northeasterly over the central Aleutians. At 3,000 feet, the strongest winds are located from across the Alaska Peninsula, then coming up from the southeast to south, around 45 to as high as 55 knots. So as we would expect, this is the area with any sort of mixing. The greatest threat of some moderate turbulence will exist along pretty much the length of the Alaska Peninsula from Bristol Bay and areas of Kodiak Island southwestward into the eastern and even central Aleutians, and we'll find bumpy conditions surface to 3,000 feet over the central and eastern Aleutians, and a little higher surface to 4,000 feet as you ride up along the Alaska Peninsula up toward Kodiak Island. But the rest of the interior mainland winds should be relatively light with little threat of any significant turbulence. And overall, the weather here, other than some scattered showers and thunderstorms that could pop up at the daytime heating either on Saturday or Sunday, we expect VFR conditions to be the rule there, especially across areas of the interior mainland here over the course of the weekend.
Since I was a little boy, I've traveled 40 to 50 miles up that river. I'm a commercial fisherman and a hunter. I hunt and I fish for my food to put on the table, and I love it. I'm Jerry Ivanoff, born and raised in Unalakleet, Alaska. I fear not for myself, but for the future generation. The lack of ice, the lack of snow has an effect on the animals and the fish that we depend on to live.
The Arctic Report Card workshop here in Nome, Alaska has been an opportunity for Indigenous people who are along the Bering Sea coast to share their experiences about the impacts of climate change for our future generations.
The Arctic Report Card is an annually produced peer-reviewed report on the state of the Arctic.
The annual Arctic Report Card says the pace of sea ice decline and surface ocean warming is unprecedented.
U.S. government scientists say there is an unparalleled period of warmth in the Arctic.
This year, for the first time, we are including a chapter on the Indigenous perspective. Specifically, it will be a chapter focused on the changing Bering Sea.
I think observation is very important.
My grandparents, they taught me how to look in the sky and observe the clouds. And they used to call me their weather person.
My father was very aware of the environment and the weather conditions, ice conditions. So he spent a lot of time talking to me about what to look for and what to watch out for.
Scientists will come in, spend a year or two in the Arctic, and then gather a whole bunch of information, and then go back. The big advantages that Indigenous people have is that they're there the whole time.
And they've seen significant changes that should have been documented starting 20 or 30 years ago.
For many years, the formula has been to invite one or two indigenous experts into a room full of scientists to hear what they have to say. At this workshop here in Nome, we are trying to shift that balance in a major way where essentially I'm the only scientist in the room.
And we are good stewards. We never depleted any stocks. We kept our land and our waters clean.
When I was growing up, the Bering Sea would be completely locked up. And now what ice we get is, we call it sikule. That's the young ice that's formed from the bottom of the ocean as slush. It floats up. Now it's thin. It's easy to break up.
We need the ice, and with it diminishing, our walruses are in danger. Even the whales that I depend on are in danger.
We have frequent storm surges, flooding, hotter temperatures, not only in the air but in the water, and it's affecting the well-being of fish, plants, and animals.
With the water being 10 to 15 degrees warmer in the Norton Sound, I caught so many belly-up fish in 2019 I've never caught before. My nets actually were totally stinky.
The biggest change I see recently is the lack of the seabirds, the migratory birds.
As a child, we had more subsistence foods. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot of food, which makes up for everything. We were rich with our foods. Today, I worry about that food disappearing.
We're having to adapt to change our ways of hunting.
It's a whole different world that we're going to have to learn to deal with.
They're seeing now what many of us are starting to see or will be seeing soon, and the longer we ignore these kinds of stories and these kinds of examples of what's in store for us, the worse things are going to be.
It is critically important for Indigenous experts from Alaska, like Jerry and Melissa, to come to major scientific meetings, like the American Geophysical Union in San Francisco, to share their observations about the warming Arctic.
10 years ago, our sea ice was about 20 miles outside of our communities, and now it's at minimum 50 miles out. It's just up to us to continue to adapt and not just stay stagnant.
I feel very positive that our voices are finally being heard.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and that scientific educational segment certainly highlights that we live in a dynamic world, and weather is every bit of that, and climate as well. And we certainly have many challenges ahead, but again, thank you for your support over these years. And looking at the sea ice, well, it has retreated farther north. It continues to gradually melt off as we expect at this point now in the summer season. Open water has become much more prevalent here through the lower Chukchi Sea, and will continue to do so here and through areas of Kotzebue Sound and up along the Arctic coast as we push through the month of July. Looking at the inner channels of the Panhandle for Saturday, the marine weather there is looking for south winds 10 to 15 knots, waves running a couple of feet, maybe 3 feet there in Lynn Canal. Could still be a few lingering scattered light showers or sprinkles. Flow that's coming in off of the Gulf out of the west-southwest, 10 to 15 knots with waves generally running around 5 feet there. A little more of a mixed bag of winds toward Yakutat. And then by Sunday, the inner channels will see winds with some sort of southerly component to 10 knots with waves a couple of feet. South of Gustavus, look for south-southwest winds 10 to 15 knots. And then outside of Yakutat Bay, easterly winds at 15 knots, waves there maybe 5 feet or so. Saturday off the Kenai, variable winds just 10 knots. Generally westerly winds within Prince William Sound to 10 knots. And southeast winds 15 knots there at the entrance of Cook Inlet. By Sunday, the frontal system that's working its way slowly up along the Alaska Peninsula will push in some stronger easterly winds. We could see 35 to 40 knot gales off of the Kenai coastline, and especially there in the entrance of Cook Inlet, with waves as high as 12 feet. Easterly winds within Prince William Sound, 3-foot waves, and northeast winds 15 knots with 3-foot waves there in Upper Cook Inlet. On Saturday, gale force winds will impact along areas of the Alaska Peninsula. We anticipate 35 to 40 knot east to northeast winds, even 30 knot northeast winds within Shelikof Strait. Waves on the North Pacific side 9 to 10 feet southwest of Kodiak Island, and from Bristol Bay down to north of Cold Bay, waves 4 to as high as 10 feet north of Cold Bay. On Sunday, winds will tend to come down over the Alaska Peninsula, but be upwards of 35 knots there, especially the northern half of Kodiak Island. Shelikof Strait, 11-foot waves. But look for east-southeast winds 15 to 20 knots as you go down the length of the Alaska Peninsula. Waves falling off to 5 to 6 feet, especially south of Perryville, and 4 or 5 feet there as you get north of Cold Bay. Across the eastern Aleutians, winds will be northeast to north on the backside of the low to 30 knots and fall off and become more mixed here as you get out toward west of Adak. Waves on the North Pacific side, 6 to 7 feet in the eastern Aleutians, 6 to 9 feet across the eastern Aleutians on the Bering side. And then Sunday, winds will be out of the west-northwest across the eastern half of the Aleutians, around 20-25 knots. Waves could be as high as 8 feet south of Nikolsky and 10 feet there to the northwest of Nikolsky as a result of still circulation around that area of low pressure. Across the southwest coast, Norton Sound winds northwest 10 knots, north winds 15 knots off the Yukon Delta. Look for northeast offshore flow 15 to 20 knots out of Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays, 25-knot northeast winds around St. Paul, St. George. And then for Sunday, easterly winds 15 knots out of Norton Sound and the lower Yukon Delta, east winds 20 to 25 knots, Kuskokwim Bay and Bristol Bay, and a north wind 20 knots there at St. Paul. Arctic coast, we expect winds to be out of the west-southwest 10 to 15 knots, more southerly through the lower Chukchi Sea and south of the Bering Strait, right around 15 knots with waves running 3 feet. And for Sunday, winds turn easterly to 20 knots along the Arctic coast, Kaktovik to Utqiagvik, and then look for north to northeast winds 10 to 15 knots passing through the Bering Strait with waves running a few feet there through the Bering Strait and onto the north side of St. Lawrence Island. And again, I want to remind you, you can find us on the new YouTube channel at NWS Alaska, so please go ahead and subscribe so you may be able to continue to receive similar content to what we have been providing over the years. And once again, on behalf of Dave, Percy, and myself, and all of us on the National Weather Service TV team, we thank you for your years of viewership, and we also wish to thank our partners at Alaska Public Media, again, especially Sean and Sherry, who have helped us in the production of this show over the years. Everyone, have a good evening, and we wish the very best for you.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.